which is owned by English Nature. We have a northern extension which has been added on, and that's owned by the Western Estate. And in total we have over 30,000 yew trees in the whole of the site. And we've also got areas of chalk downland like this. As you can see, these are all yew trees. And so we're managing this to keep the areas of chalk downlands open by sheep grazing, etc., because it's obviously very beneficial for the insects, excellent for wildflowers and so on. And there's evidence of man on this site going right back to Stone Age. So there's a lot of archaeological history here. Now, you asked me just now about how the combes were formed. If we had been here over 500 million years ago, it would have been extremely wet, because we would have been under the sea. And the sea at that time was like a chalky soup. There was these little calcite crystals in the sea. And the crystals used to eject tiny little pieces of material known as coccoliths. Now you need a microscope to see these, but if you look at a piece of chalk through a microscope, you will see these tiny little crystals. And these eventually settle on the bed of the sea, and over the eons, this is what formed the chalk. And this is obviously what we've got here in Kingley Vale. At the end of the last ice age, I think about 500,000 years ago, when everything started to melt, the actual glaciation didn't get this far south, but we had permafrost, so it was pretty cold obviously. Everything started to melt, and all this soft material came off the high ground, and it gathered such momentum that it scoured out these combes, and it carried on, and it eventually scoured out Chichester Harbour and Pagan Harbour, which was obviously a slightly different shape then. So we've ended up with three different types of soil on the site. Down in the bottom here, in the bottom of the valley, we've got what is known as coombe rock, and this is where the humus layer is thicker, richer, so consequently we have more shrubs, more insects, more birds. On the steep slopes, the humus layer is much, much thinner, and this is where you get the chalk plant communities living. And because there's very little nutrition there, they're quite happily living side by side. You get this lovely mosaic of chalk plants until it's disturbed. Either it's cut up by means of rabbits digging, or horses' hooves, or manure, if it's enriched by manure. It creates a niche for the coarser plants, and once they get a foothold, they'll spread and shade out the smaller plants, and you start losing the chalk turf. So it's really very difficult to keep the management of this site going, hang on to this chalk turf. On the top of the hill, we have bedrock of chalk, and it's overlaid with a capping of clay and flint. So we've got the clay and flint with the top, almost bare chalk on the slopes, and coombe rock down on the bottom. Now when we get along here, you'll see the first soil pit, and if you look in there, you'll see the shapes of the chalk, where they're rounded by this sliding rolling action of the chalk to high ground.
We had a lot of these this year.
Yes, they're gorgeous, aren't they? Well, this is Britain's smallest bird, the goldcrest. You could, I usually say this to the children, you could get it in a matchbox, it wouldn't be very happy.
Yes, because it's a lie that it was the wren, wasn't it?
Isn't the wren the smallest? Right.
And
it was so small they'd never seen it before then.
That's right. The long-tailed tit actually would be smaller if it went to the length of its tail. Body-wise, it's much smaller.
Is the firecrest is slightly larger, isn't it? There's the
it's
golden...
slightly larger. I'm aware of the camera here.
Willow wren, that's quite small.
It's got this brilliant white eye stripe going through the eye, and a black, what they call a supercilium, under the eye.
Oh, right.
So I'm hoping we might hear some goldcrest today. It's always I use this as a yardstick to tell whether my hearing has deteriorated to a point where, if I can't hear them, I know I'm beyond it. So happens to us all, doesn't it? But unfortunately, I was an instructor in the services, and I used to instruct in firearms as well, which doesn't help me. It's not, the hearing's not too bad. And the contact call of this, because these tiny birds, we can see each other quite plainly because we're large compared to some of the birds. But when they get up in the foliage, they can't see each other too well. So they're constantly making these contact sounds.
Like this ringing bell, isn't it?
That's right, so they keep in touch with each other. And this one just has 5 single notes, like that. 5 notes. The only problem is the sound of the firecrest is almost the same, but it's slightly more strident. There's a bit of information there. And it goes right round to post number 10, the bottom of that main gully, and comes back on the other side. And this is where the oldest trees are. There are 20. Victorian times. I mean, I'm talking Pig's Bladder rather than Wembley Stadium. And that's where the sheep fair used to be held on the 22nd of June. So of course the local shepherds used to come from all around and gather here. And we found old wine bottles, for example, there. Old wine in them, unfortunately.
That's a 17th century dew pond. How come that yew is in the centre of it then? Is that only 200 to 300 years old then, is it?
Yes.
It's a younger one in other words.
Yeah, it's just the way it's formed. The other trees, just to explain how the other yew trees got here, by the way. I've got here by means of the birds basically, the thrush family. Field pheasant and redwing come over here from Scandinavia and America. Put themselves on the yew berries which form on the female trees. And of course the seeds pass through the body in the time-honoured way. And this is what happens.
Right.
Seeds fall in the right place. Because you mentioned, was it you that mentioned juniper earlier?
Yes.
It was, wasn't it? There used to be a lot more juniper here, and on those fields either side of us, when we were coming up from the car park, they were clad with juniper.
Yeah.
And of course the juniper is so spiny and thorny, the deer won't touch it. Although the roe deer will thrash it with their antlers at the right time of year. And consequently the yew seedlings had a good chance to get away. And once they were tall enough, they shaded out the juniper, and the juniper died underneath. Unfortunately, there's not so much of the old juniper left in the woods now, because we've had the bomb disposal people coming in to clear out the remnants of the training. We still find 2-inch mortar bombs, hand grenades, things like this flying around. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but we've had 2 100% clearances here.
Still.
And we still find bombs. So this is why a lot of the juniper disappeared.
What's that down there?
Some cheating went on there. We've used a butyl liner. But what they used to do was dig it, a good 18 inches lower than they wanted the finished product to be, and they'd line the bottom with straw. Then they put the potted clay over the top. So the actual base of the pond was marginally warmer than the surrounding ground, and you got this condensation effect. And this is why a lot of the actual dew ponds were on the top of the downs. This isn't the South Downs proper, this is just a spur off the downs. And a lot of the dew ponds were on the top of the downs, simply because that's where the sheep were, and the poor old shepherd couldn't be carrying water up there on a regular basis because it was obviously so difficult. And you can sit on the right kinds of days and you can see this almost cloud effect, and you can see the moisture just dripping into the dew ponds because the surrounding air is carried underneath the actual
But without
dew
that,
pond
it would
itself.
just go straight to the trough.
Yeah. It will grow on nutritionally poor soil, like cotton, which is why it's up to there, doing that suckling good. And you can't really tell there, but on some parts of the reserve, the bottom lip is white, and if you look at the stem, it's hairy all around. But if you look at this one, the hairs run down 2 sides. If you turn it, they don't run down the...
So that's Jamander.
Yeah, that's Jamander Speedwell. You could smell this disgusting smell, and he was so concerned he couldn't find the source of the smell. He called the police, because he was certain there was a body rotting away in it, and the police found one of these, so they weren't best pleased with it.
I bet they laughed off it.
Yes, yeah.
I thought this is exciting, we're going to find a body.
That's embarrassing.
Well, if they'd done, they might have found a body under that, mightn't they?
They may well have done. Yeah. And any trees that have been felled, not on this side, they count the annual rings and say, right, if they're this girth at that height, they should be this age. But it was so unreliable.
And obviously to cut it down and count the rings, it's a bit drastic,
That's
isn't
going to
it?
kill the tree. The other method has been to use a special auger to bore into the tree to the centre, and then pull it out and peel off the annual rings. The problem is the oldest trees tend to be hollow in the centre.
They just go outwards.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you get some situations where this tree actually layers extremely well, where the branches touch the ground and they take root again.
Yeah.
It's an excellent example of that.
In Douglasfold, where we went last year, the yew tree there is said to be older than the church, and the church is about 1,000 years old.
Yes.
And I mean, the centre of the yew tree's gone. It's sort of the bits are sort of going there.
Yeah, it's amazing how you survive, isn't it? And I've even tried carbon dating. They are extremely difficult. They're known as cladodes. You can feel how spiny it is. So I said the old butchers would have cut it off at the base and just taken a handful and cleaned the remnants of meat off the chopping blocks.
See the Dewhurst van up here from time to time.
That's right, with a horse on the front. The roots sucked up the juices of the dead bodies, and these evil vapours emanated from the leaves. It's not the superstition isn't true, because Richard slept under many of the trees. I never have time. But that's one of the superstitions. But of course something that used to be done in the past when someone died was to throw a sprig of yew leaf onto the top of the coffin, that they believed that would give everlasting life. I almost trod on a pheasant that was just back there, and the sort of noise they made.
Yeah.
I'm glad I wasn't sporting a pacemaker. What they're doing, in fact, for the archery enthusiasts, they're getting the yew trees from America, because they grow so close together that they're very straight, which is exactly what they want. So if you cut a tree down like that, and there aren't any knots in it, so it's got a lovely straight trunk, you might get 4 bows out of that. We'll just quarter that down. Now, where you've got the rounded outside and the triangular inside, you've got the heartwood on the inside, this orangey red heartwood, and a lighter, paler wood on the outside. So what you do is you design that wood so that the heartwood is facing you when you draw the bow, because that is the stronger wood, and there's more tension in it. The whiter, softer wood is more pliable, if you like, and will tend to stretch further, so that needs to be on the outside. So if you think you can make a
me thinking they just sawed a branch off and put 2 bits of string on it. That's what we used to do when we were kids,
And of course the early boys, they used to pick out the various bows and knees for various parts of the ship. And see how many, or how few kiddies we can get around there. We're not wishing to spoil the myth again. As I say, if you look at this closely, you can, I was saying earlier, you can almost see the join. It's very difficult in places, but there, it looks like the branches are joined against 3 trees.
Ringing Fellowship Trust is advertising people.
And they're doing the equivalent of black joint for their wax tails and just a plate of it. Get some fantastic patterns off the bar. And we tried to stop kiddies from climbing them because the bark's so thin, the trees are easily damaged. Having said that, I couldn't resist under the tree. I assure you, when we get further along, a big bough had broken down and I couldn't resist climbing that.
In a sense, they almost prop themselves up.
Where you find small pieces of flint, and they look very, very grey, and they're covered in tiny little hairline fractures. That's where the early humans used to, they'd obviously got around to using fire, but because they had wooden utensils, they found they couldn't boil water very well. So if they wanted to heat any water for any reason, they used to put flints on the fire with the aid of a couple of sticks, and when the flints were hot, take the flints off and drop them in the water. So of course initially the water being cold just causes this sort of hairline fracturing on the flints. So it's worth keeping your eyes open.
And now we have glass saucepans.
Oh yes, that's right. Occasionally when we've had, such as the 87 storm, the trees have come over, and now and again we get a tree coming over, just sort of wet weather and so on. And I'm always looking for a nice flint axe head, but I've never seen one. Richard found one day. That's the green with the And I've noticed that growing a lot more on different parts of these years than in the past. I've just come up in here, I thought it was about time I needed, you know, just sort of field edges in this thing. And they consist mainly of flint, so the flints have been taken off the land and piled up on the edges.
So where are we now?
We come to a point, that's where we are now. If you double back and turn right, you're going to go down there and then up the next trail, which is what we will do. Cinnabar moth, or larva. Cinnabar moth. Singular.
Cinnabar.
Can you see?
Cinnabar.
Yeah, that's the larva of the caterpillar of the cinnabar moth, which feeds on the ragwort. So
Ragwort or groundsel?
They look like they've got little rugby shirts on. 250 years of age, just the average age. And on that side, about 85 to 95 years of age. Because we don't, so that's an immediate source of fish.
It's like a miniature Canterbury bird.
Yeah. And we found evidence of carbonised grain and sharded pottery this time. This is quite a rare site. This is typical of the sort of Bronze Age settlements that you find on the southern coast, chalk downland areas. This is why they call it an Idford Hill site, because it's, you know, Idford Hill isn't too far away. And this is quite a rare, for example. Apparently there are only 20 of these that have been found. Unfortunately, some of the archaeological monuments and places of archaeological interest on this site haven't been excavated, so we haven't got a lot of evidence of what is actually in there. I think so, yes. I think they're tending to leave them there. Sorry?
Is your chance to know?
Tree is in the middle distance, the peak of it, at the bottom of the gully. Well, prior to the Second World War, and back into the early 40s, the local farmer used to plough into here. And when Richard came in here, Richard wasn't the first warden here, there was a chap from Old Winchester who was putting in on this site. When Richard first came in here, this was all scrubbed off. It was like this stuff in the middle, only much higher, and there's hawthorn and all sorts in there. So he went in with a tractor and a slide, which is like a huge ropey mower. You could stand 6 people on it, it's massive. And you can back in and see the trees there, the hawthorn, etc. You could back into that and you could smash them all to pieces. Anything up to about this thickness, it would eventually just smash it down. Then he got ponies in there, and gradually, you know, once the ponies had done their job, he got some sheep in. Now that was over 25 years ago, and if you were to look at it closely, this here is really still pretty good downland. The only trouble is where the rabbits have caused so much damage, they're starting to get more scrub developing, so you have to deal with that. But this here, in terms of chalk downland, is far superior to that down there. And that has been managed as chalk downland in less than over 25 years. So it takes a long, long time to get back to quite well, enough to fool him and that lives in animal.
That's the dew pond down there.
That's it, yeah. Yes, that was dedicated to a young farm worker who got killed on one of the farmsteads, and there's a fossil bronze plaque.
Where's that down there then?
Very sad. That's Chichester Harbour down there.
Is that the Isle of Wight? Can you see the Isle of Wight sometimes from here?
Not quite from here, but I'll point it all out when we get up on the top. And, they found there used to the sort of entrances and shafts and so on.
Down.
Yeah, where they were cleared out by means of antler, deer antler and so on. And just beyond that, so if you come up here again yourself, you won't find much in there. You'll just find these depressions under the yew trees there. But this is where they are. And further up there, 2 through the gaps in the trees, you'll come across a saucer barrow about this high off the ground, and there's a bowl barrow in there as well.
Will we be looking at that, or
Not today? Yeah, there are 2 bowl barrows up on the top here and a couple of bell barrows. But they're a good way in. That's the only problem. You see, I didn't want to drag you all over the place. Just see the Isle of Wight in the distance.
Yeah.
Right, got it, yeah.
What's this is up here?
These are just the Chichester gravel pits, are they? This water to the left.
Now that's where the actual harbour comes right down into.
Oh, I see.
Fishbourne.
So, you can't see it.
The Romans line. You can have a better view of this. Come on.
Yeah, that's Fishbourne.
4 plants and acid plants living side by side. You're further over there, you have to coming up at the same short level plant. You've got wood sage here. Tomentil. Yellow flower. That's the first acid soil. Whereas you hope that the further coast there. And the lady said.
Although the Tansley stone was recently placed here, it would seem to be subconsciously sited, as dowsing revealed 2 energy lines leading into it, one going to one of the tumuli on the ridge, and the other going down the hillside. There are 4 Bronze Age barrows here, and they are often called the Devil's Humps, despite the Sussex taboo on mentioning that gentleman's name.
Over 600 metres above sea level. That dispelled another myth, but not the sort of myth that you're interested in. But apparently nightingales aren't supposed to nest above 400 metres above sea level, and we've regularly had 2 pairs nesting right on the top. These 2 are bell barrows, and these shaped barrows are typical of Wessex apparently. So the feeling is that ancient kings from Wessex were buried in here. This is how can you remember that's the chamfered edge on the bell, it's called a berm. B-E-R-M, Inspector Clouseau would think of something entirely different. And you can actually see this chamfer these are fairly uncommon, but there are about 250 examples of these bell barrows throughout Britain. Now the bowl barrows are slightly less common. There are 2, there's one there and there's one you can't quite see through the doors. They're a lot less common than the bell barrows. Now we also have 2 pond barrows which you can't see from here. There's one in here.
Well, dew ponds generally a lot bigger than that.
Of a larger diameter than that, and perhaps not quite so deep in the middle, because they were obviously designed for water in the stock.
Is that another barrow over there?
Yeah, there are 2. There's one there, and there's one that used to be a directional plinth on there. We had a phosphor bronze plate on the top, giving you the directions to different places. Someone's stolen that, believe it or not.
The line running from the stone to the tumulus goes through a multi-junction at Stoughton, the tumulus and the stone, a hilltop clump on Hayes Down, a tumulus in Rewell Wood, northwest of Arundel, a triangulation point and a cross tracks near Patching. The line that runs from the stone downhill goes through Langrish Church, Buriton Church, Up Marden Church, the stone, 2 tumuli previously mentioned, and a triangulation point near Merston. The line that runs along the length of the tumuli on the ridge comes northeast from Hayling Island through Devil's Copse, the tumuli and another large earthwork, Hayshot Church and a triple junction, and Ball's Cross. Chichester Cathedral from the tumulus. The line joining them goes through a church at Petersfield, a tumulus at Foxcombe Farm near South Harting, Uphook House, the tumulus on the ridge, a spot marked crossroads near West Broyle House, and the cathedral. Note there seems to be a marking in the field in front of the cathedral which seems to align with this line. Chichester was one of the earliest cities in Britain to be built by the Romans, who called it Novi Omegas. Traces of their original city wall survive. The cathedral was built early in the 12th century by Ralph Luffer, bishop from 1091 to 1123, and has had rather a checkered history, burning down twice, being attacked during the Civil War, and partly collapsing in 1861. Its detached bell tower is unique in England, and its spire is a landmark for miles around. A pond barrow with a berm.
But looks nice and straight to me. I love it when there's a field boundary that confirms another alignment, because that is more sneaky than, you know, than lots of things. Actually, a field boundary, because that's sort of confirmatory of the fact that there had been an earlier line.
Warden, that's all. What's the white building?
The edge, that's right, the lower edge of the bell, the rim if you like. Whereas your bell has the typical sort of bell shape like that, it would suddenly go down to that sort of barrow. Like a door. It's called the boom. Chamfered edge, like that. That's the boom.
Most of these are eroded. You know. My temple at the back of me, my Romano British temple, they come up from the valley that way and the valley that way, and they join, a bit like the Avebury line. You know, they just come up totally random to this temple site, and they say, oh well, I expect that's where they drove the cattle. But why did they drive the cattle up to the temple site? Unless it was sacrificial or something. But because they wouldn't have had fences, you see, so there is some merit in thinking that they used them for cattle, you know, because the cattle couldn't have got out.
That's right.
And these would have been a lot deeper.
That's about the only theory they've got, isn't it? That perhaps there was some sort of boundary marker.
Yes, but a boundary, but extraordinary fancy choosing a boundary and then digging a line like this.
That's right, yeah. It doesn't make any sense. We should be able to see them now. It's about this time of year. There's a skipper there. It's landed. Can anybody, if you go, it's okay, stay. Sorry, I'm digressing onto the skippers. The small skipper and the Essex skipper, they look identical. The only way you can tell them apart is by looking at the clubs on the end of the antennae. And if it's black on the top, they usually hold the clubs out like that from the head. If it's black on the top, they're a small skipper. If you can remember, oh, it sounds a bit dodgy, this doesn't it? If you think of black satin, if you can think of satin surface, SS, small skipper. If it's black underneath, it's an Essex skipper. I think you'd be interested.
The Essex skipper has a London accent too, doesn't it?
That's right, they're very, very difficult to identify those.
Has anybody seen the skipper?
This is all margin. Yes, the
And then comes down there.
it disappears after several, or
Yeah.
peters out after several yards.
And shoots off down there, at a different angle. But the amount of work they put into it with you know, with reindeer blades or whatever it was. What wind?
That's right. I meant to say,
There's the rock rails.
you don't know what I'm talking about yet. Right hand end,
I can, in the distance.
see the tank, that's Portsmouth. The next one is Hurling Island, and the next one is Thorney Island. And if you look to your left, about halfway along Thorney Island, can you see where you've got grass? It's very short. You can actually see a runway coming along there, diagonally from right to left. As you know, that was used during the Second World War as an air base.
Just before the water goes, you mean?
That's right. See where the slightly wider stretch of water is here?
Yeah.
See the lovely green field?
Yeah.
You've got the pigsties here.
Yeah.
in the nice dark green, and the next stretch of water, just beyond that is Thorny Island.
Oh, right.
And the next one this way is Chidham. Now if you look, that's the mouth of Chichester Harbour straight over there, and it comes into Langstone Harbour, and then comes in between Chidham and Thorny Island, and it comes down here towards us. Can you see that left elbow? It bends to the left, doesn't it? That's the entrance of Bosham Harbour, and that's where King Canute's daughter is reputed to be buried. And where the water comes down to this end, it's known as the tide bylaw, because that's where King Canute was reputed to try to stop the sea.
Well, he did, didn't he? Look, you can see.
You can see his armchair.
Tried to do that.
Well, what they did, in fact, they built a little barrier across there, and they reclaimed some of the land on the end of the ship. It was rich in ideal for growing crops on. And apparently there was quite a storm one night, and I think the locals were concerned that it was going to breach this barrier. And as legend has it, he went out there in his deck chair, didn't he, to try and got actually. From a distance, it looked just like an orchid. The pyramidal orchid. That's the one.
Take him off your pay if you get it wrong.
That's right. See, this is
It is wild.
yeah.
Look,
This is a better one. It's got a lot of fruit on it.
just starting
And some of it's starting to change. When they turn, the colour becomes. I see from oranges and sort of fruits and I'm not so sure about that.
I tried to apply for it in my garden. It's died.
Yeah, probably. No, I think first the stuff that I did that I used to make my own wine.
Bosham Church, where King Canute's daughter is reputedly buried, and which is also depicted on the Bayeux tapestry, also has a line running to Kingley Vale. This line skirts a fort north of Chithurst, goes along a coincident track through a church at Diddling, a long barrow on Stoughton Down, the tumulus on the ridge, a crossroads, and Bosham Church.